Head on Fire is a Patreon-supported podcast. Supporters of the show get early access to audio and video content, episode archives, monthly roundtables, a book club, and more. All benefits are offered on a sliding scale, so no matter your level of donation, you never miss out. If you like this show, consider supporting it with $1 a month or whatever you can at patreon.com/headonfirepod. Thanks, and enjoy the show. My childhood was filled with stories. I mean, I'm sure yours was too. Mine were Animorphs and the Dark is Rising series. I was obsessed with mythology. I was reading Edith Hamilton and Arthur Cotterell from, as long as I can remember. My grandmother bought me these Reader's Digest books that were all of the collected fairy tales of the world, or at least probably just the ones from Europe. I grew up obsessed with stories, and later on, that led to becoming a writer myself. I write stories, and the thing about writing is that it is incredibly solitary. The only thing that people see is the finished book on the shelf. They don't really understand the craft of writing, how many years it takes to get good at writing, how many bad pieces of writing you have to write to get good. The only thing you see is what's on the shelf, what's in your hands. And people consume books very quickly these days. I mean, gosh, I go on social media and there are people that are reading a book a day, big giant books. And I'm thinking, my gosh, I love books. I write books. And where are y'all getting the time? There's this relationship between authors and book consumers. Story consumers, really. I was talking to a friend the other day about the fact that, one of the pieces of culture that I love the most is like X-Men and the stories that I get out of comic books. And now that Marvel has gone mainstream and sort of is the movie industry right now, saying that out loud makes it sound really sad. but really, I was reading comic books as a kid and drawing a lot of inspiration from there. And the thing is, the people that write those stories, even the people that write the stories in the books that I own, sometimes the authors of those stories get lost. The craft of writing that story gets lost. The weeks and months and years that author spent creating that work, we don't see that. We just see the finished work and we know the story that they told. I've been lucky enough to interview a lot of authors over the years, but I've not interviewed a lot of authors that ended up topping the charts on the New York Times bestseller list. So when I got the opportunity to talk to Ayana Gray, who published her debut novel, Beasts of Prey, September of last year. Actually, we're book birthday twins, turns out. When I got the chance to talk to Ayana Gray, the New York Times bestselling author of Beasts of Prey, whose follow-up book, Beasts of Ruin, comes out today, I jumped at the chance. We talked about writing and the parasocial relationship between authors and readers, the way that we have to market books on social media these days, and all points in between. It's a fascinating discussion, and I hope you'll enjoy. Here's Ayana Gray. Ayana Gray, welcome to Head on Fire. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Don.
Oh, I'm so glad to connect with you. We got to meet in a very strange way on TikTok, of all places.
Yes. Mutual angst united us.
I cannot wait to get there. But for the 12 people in my audience that don't know who you are, could you tell my audience a little bit about you and your work?
Okay. Hello. My name is Ayana Gray. I am a young adult fantasy author. I'm the author of the Beasts of Prey trilogy. It is a Pan-African inspired fantasy that follows two Black teens as they venture into a magical jungle to find a monster that has been menacing their city for nearly a century. And of course, as soon as they step into this magical jungle, nothing goes according to plan. Adventure ensues. You all know the rest. It's the first book. Beasts of Prey came out last fall. The second book, Beasts of Ruin, comes out in just a little less than a month, July 26th. And then there'll be a third book at some point. I will let you know, but I'm still writing it. But that's me. I live in Little Rock, Arkansas. Yeah, I'm obsessed with animals, you guys. That's me.
My husband's a veterinarian. We are very obsessed with animals around here as well. Do you have a menagerie of your own?
I don't have okay, so I don't have a menagerie because my spouse sadly is not a huge animal person. So I have been allotted one mini golden doodle, and she's a terror, and she's not like helping my case to get more. But her name is Dolly. If you follow me on any social media, you will see her, you will hear about her. She's my child. And I'm obsessed with her. And I also support it's this organization called Sheldrick Wildlife Trust. They look after orphaned elephants and basically creatures who've been orphaned due to poaching. So I adopted slash sponsored a rhino named Apollo, who is a character. So I talk about him sometimes too.
He's
my other
included.
pet.
He's your
He's
pet.
included. Yeah,
Absolutely.
my
we
3,000-pound baby.
we have a bit of a menagerie. We have two dogs, a cat, obviously, a heck a ton of horses in the backyard. We've had two birds. Sadly, neither of them are with us anymore. We are trying to get an African gray. That'll probably be my present to myself for finishing my next book.
Yes, yes.
A nice big parrot. So I have a question for you because we are both writers that have come into spaces after having lived lives where we had to kind of find ourselves in narratives. So as a child and throughout my formative years, I had to like fit myself into stories because there weren't a lot of stories that were written for me. There weren't a lot of stories, centering queer characters. What were those stories for you? Where did you find yourself whenever you weren't directly represented? And how did that affect your storytelling?
Ooh, that's tough. I think that a lot of times I forced myself. Like I was like, I don't really fit here, but I'm gonna find some convoluted way
Yeah.
to make this relate to my life. Um, I will say that the first time I read a book that like I felt like seen almost to an uncomfortable point. It was reading like The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and reading really anything by Toni Morrison because she has such a raw way of writing. She's a wordsmith. I think, and also I like my schools did not like she was not mandatory reading. Like I found her in the way that I found her on my own, and sort of I felt like I discovered her for myself. That was probably the first time I felt seen as a Black girl in literature, like truly.
How early did you start seeking out those kinds of stories and voices?
Not till high school, honestly.
Really?
Not high school going into college. Like, background, I went to predominantly white schools for basically my entire life. Not because my parents just like wanted that, but because my parents really believed in education. And as we know, there are disparities in education. And so oftentimes the nice schools in the area, the private schools in the areas where I grew up ended up being predominantly white. So I was just subjected to a lot of whiteness and a lot of white literature that I just didn't think to question until I was a young adult. So yeah.
I think for me, it was probably Animorphs. Something about kids that don't neatly fit into other narratives, turning to science fiction and fantasy. I feel like that is universal. Even if you grow out of that, even if you stop reading science fiction or fantasy, later on, those seem to be the stories that people gravitate to.
Yeah, there's a universal appeal to the I don't fit in, I'm trying to find my people. And I think that's part of why YA that's why so many adults continue to read young adult, I think, because that idea of finding your place in the world, finding your purpose, that is such a universal thing.
I know, it's interesting that you bring up YA because I've had to wrestle with that. I know that my agent and I had conversations last year about like the novel that I'm working on. Is it YA? Is it something else? Is it what is that? And I think there's this burgeoning conversation about what even is for young adults anymore.
Yes.
I know that there's kind of been this narrative in the last several years that like queer people, especially like queer men in their 30s and 40s, tend to go through this like coming of age thing all over again and go back to find those stories because they didn't get to live that kind of that time period as their authentic self. And I think there's something to that, but I think that just there are so many stories now where different kinds of perspectives are centered and they are the main character. So for folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond that didn't get to see themselves as the main character, they are going back. They want to see themselves as the protagonist in that superhero story. So I wonder, do you find a challenge with the label of YA? Do you find a challenge with that label, or are you just like, you know what, we're here, we all know what we're reading, so
Oh, that's a really good and very timely question, actually. Because I'm 2 books in now. And it's one of the questions I get most often is, what age? Like, how old can you be? And that's hard to answer because I know at 10, 11 years old, I was a voracious reader. So I could probably handle like a big tome. But not every 10 or 11-year-olds like that. I think
Sure.
the official age is 12 and up for Beasts of Prey, but I know 10-year-olds who've read it. I had an 83-year-old pastor contact me and say they read it. So clearly there's no ceiling. I love certain things about YA, and there are things that I don't like, but I think instead of being mad or annoyed about them, I try to push those boundaries and kind of challenge them, because if other authors don't challenge what it means to be a teen or what's appropriate, quote unquote, for young readers, then who will? Yeah, so I'm a millennial. I grew up during the YA boom, and it's been YA is a pretty relatively new concept, like this idea of a whole industry of books being for young readers. So I think it's going to continue to evolve. We've seen it, much as I am loath to talk about it. We know that Harry Potter had a huge impact on children's literature. We know that the Hunger Games, we know that
Twilight, which is getting this whole like revisionist revival.
Yeah. I feel old because I'm like, I was there for the OG like midnight. I went to the midnight book premieres at Barnes and Noble to get my hands on these books. And it's like, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like secondhand embarrassment, like that but also not, because it was really fun to like go with my friends for a book, to go to a midnight premiere of a book. Like, sorry. So all that to say, like, YA has gone through so much change, even in say the last, like in the 20 years. And I think it's just gonna continue. So it's fun to be there and to be living through it.
I am transitioning from nonfiction to fiction. And I'm curious about your perspective as to, already having found success in that world. What do you think writers fundamentally misunderstand about writing fiction? And conversely, what do you think readers fundamentally misunderstand about reading fiction?
Oh gosh, I think, and ironically, I think this speaks to how we met. And maybe no, it's not limited to just fiction, but I think like with nonfiction, for example, you have a subject matter, you gather your research, you write, and it's not, so you have kind of a source material to pull from. With fiction, you're making everything up. You're making everything up, which just requires you to use a different part of your brain. Like, I have an academic background, and I can write an essay, I can write a historic, like, something about like West African history if I wanted to, because that's my academic background. But that's like a different part of my brain that, at least for me, is easier, because it's like I'm taking research, I'm amalgamating it, I'm synthesizing it, and writing, inserting my thoughts and opinions. But that's different than pulling out of nothing. It's like it's like creating from absolutely nothing. And sorry, brain is all over the place. But what I was going to say too is that people have this idea that authors just sit at beautiful typewriters in aesthetically pleasing rooms, and we just create and nothing ever interrupts us. And in fact, like, we're in the 2020s, we're not just writers anymore. We are content creators. We are, we're our own administrative assistants. We are our own tax accountants. Like, we're doing all of these things on top of creating that people don't see. Like, all you care, not you, but all a reader cares about is the book. And but there are other things happening in the background that have to happen for me to continue to eat. So, misconceptions about being a writer.
I think also I'd like to talk about the process of writing, specifically the process of writing fiction, and the fact that we live in a much more connected world where information is much more readily available, where we are having different kinds of conversations about appropriation, about living, about uplifting certain voices, about uh, being informed before writing on a topic.
Mhm.
And I think that there are some writers out there who are at odds for some reason with creating a fictional narrative in an informed way, in a way
Mhm.
that you know. I won't sit here and point fingers at any particular authors, but authors with white authors with a protagonist of color, for
Yeah.
example, um, that don't seem to be writing from a place of being informed, a place of care, of ethical concern for doing right by that character. Do you have any advice for writers that are trying to write fiction and recognize that it's all still a made up world, but we do still have to live in the world of 2022 in real life?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something, the standards are higher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for fiction in general. And I always think about kid-lit fiction, but really fiction, like people are really demanding authenticity, which they should. And I've been asked about this. I want to write a Black character. My main character is Black. My main character is queer. My main character is this identity that I don't share. How do I do it right? And the question I always ask in turn
Mm-hmm.
is, why are you doing this? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not accusatory, it's a genuine question.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What is your purpose in doing this? Ask yourself honestly. You don't owe me an answer, but you
Mm-hmm.
need to go in knowing that. Because if you want to write a Black character, um, because that's genuinely how you saw the character, how it came to you. This is my opinion. There are some
Mm-hmm.
people who will say it doesn't matter, don't write Black characters if you're not Black. I don't believe that, because I think there have been books where there have been white authors who have written Black characters and gotten it right. There are Black authors who've written white characters and gotten it right. It just requires more work. But um, if you're doing it to check a box, if you're doing it for points, if you're doing it without considering the nuance of doing it, then you need to kind of pause, I think, and and consider, is this the right story for you to tell? And are you taking a spot from somebody else who could do it authentically and better and without causing harm? There are some perspectives that I am not equipped to write. That's not my lived experience. I'm a Black woman, but I'm also, cisgender. I'm also heterosexual. Like there are spaces that I know another writer could write it better, and they should write it because it's coming from a more authentic place than I could ever hope to do it. So I just think it requires a lot of kind of hard work, like internally with yourself, before you approach these narratives.
Yeah, I call it sort of the Upworthy video, which Upworthy I don't even think is a thing anymore, but it was for a very long time in like the 2010s. All of these like inspiration porn videos would go around
Yeah.
where, I don't know, a disabled person would suddenly, I don't know, a person who couldn't walk before can walk, and now everybody is sharing it. I know one that went around for several years and made my DMs fill up with all of the kids from high school that had treated me like crap. Was I don't know, some gay kid made amends with their bully from high school, and it made everybody like, oh, that's so good. I call it the Upworthy video like stimulus, because I don't know, I feel like somebody sees some kind of inspiration porn on the internet and then they're like,
Yeah.
oh, that inspired me, I want to go write a story about that.
Yes. Yes.
And
Mm-mm.
I remember being in that mindset in like my late teens, early 20s, being the most progressive person in my small town, my really small
Yeah.
town. And it's like, the angrier you get at the social injustices of the world, the more that you want to create art about it. And I get that. And I
Mm-hmm.
sympathize with that. And there's goodness in that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a way to do it, which
Mm-hmm.
is not just like writing from a place of emotion, writing from a place
Right.
of this is so unfair, and then just simply sticking your character in that narrative. that you
Hmm.
found.
Yeah, well, and I've talked about this too. Like, let's say you have a main character in your story and they are a hero going on an epic quest, typical hero's journey. The minute you make that character, for me, the minute you make that character queer, the minute you make that character of color, the minute you make them disabled, when you add these layers to their identity, you intrinsically change the story. You
Mhm.
cannot just have a character, oh, they'll be black today, and nah, actually today I want them to be Asian. Like, people's identity, it informs everything about who they are. I speak like, and it's a funny example, but when I see somebody who's old enough to be my parent, I cannot call them so and so first name. I have to say Miss so and so, Mr. So and so. Why? Because I was raised by a black woman who was raised by another black woman, and that is a cultural thing. So the way I navigate the world is directly influenced by my background. And so that same thing goes for your character. So if you can do it if you want to, you can write these characters who maybe don't share the identity that you have, but you have to understand you're going to have to do that much more work to make sure that that identity is not shallow, that it's truly well thought out and developed throughout the entire, like the everything about that character.
And that's the work of writing, right? I don't think
Mhm.
that I don't want cisgender heterosexual people to erase queer people from their narratives because they're afraid of being canceled on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
The world has queer people in it. The world has people of color in it. The world has people with disabilities in it. The world has people in it. So your stories should look like the world around you. It's just that
Mhm.
means your job's going to be a little harder.
Yep.
And
That's
that's the
it's a
work of
job.
writing. Yep,
That
it's a
is that
job.
is literally the work of writing.
Yep, yep. Talking about some of the work of writing, I do want to talk about the ways that you used your social media platform because some people might find you on social media not from your work, but from your advocacy about Black history. I know
Mhm.
you've had several videos go viral. So talk to me a little bit about your educational background and why it's so important for you to inform as much as entertain.
Ooh. So I have two degrees. One of them is in political science. The other is in African and African American studies. Both of those things inform my writing. And it's kind of nice because I was fortunate to get degrees in things I genuinely and personally care about outside of just because I had to learn about it in school. So it's almost like I can't help. It's not like this deliberate choice. Today I'm going to make something educational. Today I'm going to do something that entertains. I'm just talking about things that I'm into. And I'm hoping, like, that's the trick, I think, with social media. I think you put out what you love, and people can tell what you genuinely care about. And what you do is you find your people, like the
Mm-hmm.
people who are into it, or who want to learn more, they will come and they will sort of like, you build a community that way. That happened on Twitter with the writing. I'm a writer, so I was tweeting about writing related things. And lo and behold, I found fellow writers. Same thing with Instagram. With TikTok, which has been the newest thing I've been trying, I talk a lot about being a Black woman. I talk a lot about Black history because I think it's cool. I talk about saving turtles because I love animals, and book stuff, of course, because I'm an author. Um, I think one cool thing, and you've probably seen it. Millennials, we grew up when social media was new and everything was very curated. Everything was very pretty. Gen Z, I feel like we're at an age where social media, people appreciate rawness a lot more than curated, pretty,
Mm-hmm.
perfect,
Mm-hmm.
So it's been kind of cool. It's been cool to like to get to be very honest and feel received in a very authentic way.
Does anyone in your family ever say, "Why aren't you using those degrees, Ayana?"
Well, I no, but my dad was like, sometimes I think you would have been a good lawyer. And we joke, he's like, you're because a Juris Doctorate degree is a terminal degree, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I have New York Times best-selling author. That's also terminal. That's also a permanent thing I have. So,
Yep.
right. Yeah. No one's bothering me now about it, but my parents definitely been like, what are you doing, Ayana?
Yeah, yeah, I get that. I get that quite a bit. Do you think that this is such a simple question with such a weird and complex answer, but do you think that authors and readers should interact, or at least should interact as much
Ooh,
as they're currently interacting?
ooh, spicy. Oh gosh, it is a mm, simple answer no. Simple answer no. I don't. I was just thinking during one of my existential crises, as you know, I have a book coming out in less than a month, which means existential crises are now timed.
You're going to question every
Um,
single thing that you've ever done for the next month.
yeah. Yeah, well, I was thinking about the fact to go back to Twilight. I remember being like a 15-year-old high school freshman and thinking at the time, Stephanie Meyer is so cool. She came up with this
Mhm.
really cool world. The only access point that I had to Stephanie Meyer was her author website. Like, and I read her author website from top to bottom. I read all her frequent asked questions, I read all of her interviews, but there was no way for me to directly access that woman. And because I couldn't access her, it almost made her more mysterious. Like she was even cooler because she was this aloof author figure. Um, and now I'm an author and it's the opposite. Like people can very literally reach directly out to me with no barrier. Um, and that hurts the creative space a little bit, like when you have outside voices. So I've had to be pretty militant about setting up as many barriers as I can, even though some places you just can't. Um, I think I think authors and readers having interaction in controlled spaces is good. Author events, when the author chooses to say, I'd like to talk to readers and share a little bit, that's fine. I think unfettered access to anyone is bad, whether you're an author or any person. Having unfettered access all the time is not healthy for boundaries.
Yeah, I think that there is a space at which somebody says, well, I want to join the conversation. I have opinions too. I'm still a person. Doesn't matter what I do. And I think that that's fair. Um, on the flip side, I do think that we have had a reckoning with the fact that our movie stars, our authors, all of those people are real people, and all of the things that means.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things that means. We now know people's opinions about things that we never knew about their opinions before,
That we
and
probably didn't need to know.
we didn't need to know that. And I think that we're in an age where we're asking ourselves, and there's no right answer, and I don't think that answer is going to come for a very long time, of whether it's good that we do have this much access
Yeah, it,
to
it has
to
been good in
people.
some ways. Yes, yeah. It's one of those things I'm sure we'll look back on
Mhm.
later. Like we're in it, so it's hard to look, but we'll look back and be able to say what this was good or not. But like there have been good things that have come out of that
Yeah.
direct access. And it is kind of cool that like I technically could like tweet at the president and like he technically could see it and respond. And um that's cool. Like from a fan
Mhm.
perspective, that's really really cool that like you can be seen now, you can connect with someone in another country, another state. I'm just all about boundaries. I'm
Yeah.
almost
Neil
30 and
Gaiman
I'm
will
all about
respond to
boundaries.
you on Twitter. If you
He
ask him
will.
about anything, he will respond to you. And that's him. And that's
That's
cool.
so cool. It is
It's
cool.
so
Like
cool.
and but see but then Neil, like I know Neil Gaiman. Neil is
She has
choosing.
tea with him.
I have tea every Tuesday with Neil. Um, but what's cool is Neil is at that point choosing, like he sees it and he's choosing to respond to it, right? And he has
Mhm.
opened himself up to allow that. Um, I will tell you, like, I've had to deal with stalkers. Like, that's where I'm at in my career now. Like, people not respecting boundaries. And that's where I start to get kind of, because I live in a relatively small city.
Mhm.
Um, so it sounds like paranoid, but it's a real concern. And there are authors who've had readers show up at their homes, who email like reach out to their family and friends. And that's where it's like, it starts to be icky. So it's a really complicated thing, but I'm for moderation.
One of the best pieces of advice that I got, my book came out last September, the end of September, and every author friend that I knew said block Goodreads on your phone.
Yes.
Block,
Yes.
if you can go and set up a specific website block for just a page, you don't have to block all of Goodreads, but if you could just block your book's page on Goodreads and block your book's page on Amazon and
Yep.
NetGalley.
Yep.
Don't go looking at that.
I
That's not for
agree.
you.
It's not. It really is not. And it's hard. It's hard
Mhm.
because you want honest feedback. I have friends who are debuting even today, and they've
Mhm.
been looking at it. I'm
I
like, stop,
saw.
get
Yeah,
off Goodreads.
congrats.
Yeah, I'm like, get off Goodreads. Which, by the way, what day did your book come out? Because I'm wondering about something now.
September 28th.
We're the same day.
Oh, yay! Happy book birthday to us. Book
Yeah, so we'll get to
twins.
celebrate our 1 year book anniversary later this fall. I was sorry, distracted, but I was like, oh, I'm also end of September. Um, but yeah, to go back. I've been telling any friends, get off Goodreads, block, give your passport. Oh my god, password to a friend and
Mhm.
tell them not to tell you, so that you literally cannot ever go on it, because it does nothing for you. It either inflates your ego and you're like, I'm a genius, I never need to improve my craft, or you're like, I'm a terrible writer. These people all hate my book. None of it is good for your mental health or your creative
Mm-mm.
space. So protect your space.
The thing that I think that readers, to go back to an earlier question, sort of fundamentally misunderstand maybe about writers, because I see this a lot on social media. And I had something, I don't know, some derivative video of the video where you and I were talking about marketing. Somebody said, so authors, because I was talking about don't tag authors in your Instagram
Yes.
review. We don't want to
Yeah.
see that. Please don't tag us in your social media review.
Mhm.
Pretty please. And somebody wrote back that they were like, so they don't want critique. They don't want good critique, or they don't want valuable critique, or something, along those lines. And I'm like, not from you.
Exactly.
And what I think that readers get offended by that. Like, how
Mhm.
dare you? And I just think that readers don't quite understand that there are a lot of you out there,
Mhm.
and we can't listen to all of you at the same time.
Yeah, well, and the advice will be contradicting. And my polite question is, what makes your critique more valuable than my editor who's been doing this for 20 years?
Right.
My agent who's been doing this for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
What, and it's like, for example, I wouldn't get, like, I don't know, medical advice from someone who's not been to med school or has some sort of accreditation. So what background do you have to tell, like, me how to write a good story from a craft perspective? I ask my friends who published books who've been through this, my editor who has edited, like, probably at this point hundreds of best-selling award-winning books, because she knows your taste is subjective. Like, I don't know why that's hard. My thing is, if you wouldn't say it to my face, don't at me. Just enjoy your space over here. I'll enjoy my space over here.
Absolutely. 100%. That's the thing, is I don't think people quite realize that, like, the thing that you loved about my book is the thing that somebody else hated about my book. And the thing that
Yeah.
they loved about my book is something you're going to hate about my book.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we can only listen to so many voices, and we have to do what's right. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, there's that small caveat of, if something slipped through the cracks that in retrospect is like, that's maybe that does show off a bias that I had, that I didn't realize that I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
There's certainly a place for conversation there. And I don't want anybody listening to think that, like, we never want to hear, like, nothing we put out in the world is free of critique. But there's a
Right.
difference. There's a difference.
Yeah. The terms I hear a lot in children's lit are calling in versus calling out.
Yes,
And I
I'm
think,
loving seeing that phrase come to the forefront.
yeah, I think, and so again, cases vary.
Mhm.
Sometimes it needs to be called out. But I'm always really appreciative of people who call in, and it hasn't happened to me, but I've seen it happen to friends, where somebody will just, reach out and say, hey, you probably didn't know this, but this term you used, this thing you said, could be considered offensive. We just saw what happened with Lizzo and her
Lizzo, yeah.
song. And I thought that was a beautiful example of correction, calling it in, correction, and moving forward with forgiveness. Because we have to remember too, sometimes these things, these missteps are accidents. I was on a Zoom call. Sorry to be anecdotal, but I was on a Zoom call and somebody used the term spirit animal. And I sent a private message. So didn't call out on the Zoom or in the group, the public chat, but a private message and said, hey, you might not have known this, but spirit animal is a sacred term to some Indigenous people. You know, and it's, you know, we should use it very carefully. I
Mm-hmm.
used to not know that. I used to say, oh my gosh, my spirit animal, because I
Yep.
did not know better. So I'm
Yep.
not coming at you from a place of judgment. Yeah, so I'm all for calling in and correcting when you need correct me. I'll tell people all the time, correct me if I misstep. I want to
Mm-hmm.
know so I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
It's about intent. And I think the way you do it, because I think there are like people who clout chase, who just live to call out, call out, call out, and it's not coming from a good place. So it's about intent all the time.
Yeah, I am still waiting for the big call out video to be posted on TikTok because of my book, because there was a big thing that I screwed up on, and I'm still waiting to be called out on it. And it was that I called Millie Bobby Brown's character in Stranger Things 7 instead of 11, and that made it through. That made it through 20 something beta readers. That made it through. I don't know how many rounds of edits. I don't know how many times I reread that book. So I'm just waiting on the fan to like make the
Oh
call out
my
TikTok
gosh.
and be like, did you guys he didn't even
Done. What are you personally going to do? What is your action plan to never do this again? What are
I
you going to
have
be doing to the 11 community to make up for this?
I have had my notes app apology ready for like 6 months.
No,
I'm
not a
just
notes app screen.
and
The
me just
classic.
sitting, I green screen it, and then I'm just down here in the bottom corner, just like,
I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm listening and I'm learning. Because
yep.
this is so like you see this, it happens like somebody will do something, community gets angry, community calls out, it turns into a pile-on. The initial like good part of the call out is lost because it
Oh
turns
yeah.
into a I just want to yell at this person. And then the person does the notes app apology. Like that's I love that it's become like a standard thing to write in the notes app and take a screenshot.
Well, mostly,
Oh
I mean,
gosh.
not to devolve into a conversation about this, call
Mhm.
out versus call in thing, but I kind of wonder at the end of the day, what are people looking for?
Mhm.
Like, what's the end result you want here? Do you want that author, that movie star, that whatever it is that they do? If they have a history of not being a terrible person for the most part, what is the end result that you're seeking here? Do you want them to
Exactly.
just go like jump into a lake and then go live in the lake forever
Yep.
under the water just forever? Like,
Exactly.
what do
Never,
you want?
never grow into a better person, which that should be the goal. It should be like, I want you to be better. I want you to do better because actually with books, there are people who like maybe they've never read a story about a gay kid or a black kid or a gay black kid and this is their first experience and you have this responsibility that you're like you're kind of educating and informing
Mhm.
perhaps somebody's first interaction. That's the real reason we want you to get this right because you have power and the whole with great power great responsibility comes with it. That should be the real reason you're correcting it, not because you want clout and more followers on whatever platform you have. And this is something that Kidlit is very bad about. I'm it's well known. Kidlit is very bad about, to me, calling out in a way where the intent is not pure. It's from a I want to build a platform off of this, like, which is kind of frustrating. I don't know. I stay out of book talk, so I don't know if it's quite the same on book talk, but
I
it's
don't.
like that on Twitter.
My algorithm seems to know that I can't handle that.
Mhm.
I get a lot of recipe videos. I get a lot of comedy content.
Yeah.
My algorithm is pretty choice. It's
Well,
good.
Don, I have a question for you. I know that this is
Yes.
your podcast, but I want to ask you
Yes.
something because I've had this discussion with a lot of friends. Um, that relationship between like authors and book talk reviewers and such, like how do you navigate that, like those boundaries on in a place like TikTok, where you like sometimes you'll get TikToks from people that you don't follow, but the algorithm
Mhm.
just like puts them in your face. Because I have one friend, she's like, these people are saying nice things about my book and I appreciate it, but I don't know if I should follow them and if that's my place to do that. Like, it's a very tricky space.
No, I don't follow. I think when people used to talk about my podcast, because I had a podcast long before I had a book deal. And I think sometimes when people talked really well about my show, I felt like required to follow them back on like Twitter or something, just kind of like as a thank you. And then you unfollow them like in a month.
Yeah.
Or something. So I'm like, you're doing nothing for me here. But no, I don't, that was much younger person me. I graciously say thank you, and move on. But sometimes I will say I am really cautious of if I even should comment.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody posts a really great review of my book on Instagram, I was just tagged in one just the other day. And I was like, oh, I did just kind of do this whole thing about please don't tag authors in reviews, but this one's really nice. So am I being a hypocrite if I don't know, but it was a really good one because they said, well, this is the first time I've ever seen like disability handled with this much care in a book like this. And I was like, well, that feels really specific and that feels really good. And so I just wanted to say, thank you for seeing that work was done on, but yeah, I don't know. I have a bad answer for that. I think I usually try to scroll through, or not insert myself, because I feel like what you were saying earlier, inserting yourself and starting to comment and starting to say thank you so much begins that parasocial relationship with some people. Some people don't know how to turn it off. Some people don't know how to turn it off. Some people don't know how to just receive a thank you and move on.
Yeah, it also opens, it kind of, I don't consider myself a naive person, Dawn, but pre-debut, like last fall, I remember I was getting a lot of like very basic, for example, questions about my book. Where can I buy it? And as a debut author, you want to make sure everybody knows exactly where to buy your book, right? Well, on places like Instagram, you have a separate inbox for people who you don't know, but they'd ask these questions. I would answer. And now they have.
And now you can respond to me.
Now you have,
Now there's this, there we go. Now people have this access to me that I've opened this line of communication that I didn't intend. And my friends were like, you've got to stop doing that.
Yeah.
They know where to find your book, Ayana. They want to see if you respond.
I did the same thing. I guess I should have looked it up. I had no idea that our debuts were the same day, but I've had the same trajectory. I've had the same arc of people asking, how do I get the book? Where's the best place to buy the book? Where and you want to respond to everyone. And I didn't realize that or somebody posts a review and posts to stories. And even if I just like repost, that opens up your DM to me. And I don't want that.
Yeah. Not for personal reasons, but because you can't, as one human being, possibly maintain.
It starts getting so big. It starts getting so big. And I don't know you. And I feel like allowing you into my DM space lets you have that parasocial feeling that like, if you saw me on the street, I would want to like go hang out with you or something.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing about books too. We're just like vibing right now, but like, I know I've read books that meant so much to me that I felt like I knew the author personally because the book was so good and it's endearing and it's sweet. But I know now I'm like, you don't actually know them, Ayana. You just love their book. And I never want to like hurt somebody's, damage their experience with a book. If you read Beasts of Prey and it resonated with you, I don't want to take that away, but that's my art. That's not necessarily me. It's just a piece of me that I've put out into the world. So that's another thing is like people almost sometimes feel entitled to you or feel like they know you better than they do because they've connected with your work.
So I got to sort of live a dream a few months ago. And do you know the show Queer as Folk?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to talk to Peter Page, who played Emmett Honeycutt. Yeah, that was I know. And the thing is, the kids today have no idea who he is. And that made me feel ancient. And I was like, what? This was like a huge thing for me to get to interview him for this show. Because he's gone on to do so many, he's this massive producer now. And like basically any kind of queer TV or movie, he probably is either producing or writing or something right now. But it's so interesting sort of seeing who I thought he was, watching his character and falling in love with Emmett and seeing myself so much in Emmett, and then getting to meet Peter and seeing how they are very different people. I mean, they're alike in certain ways, but those ways are so superficial, and how the person is so different. And I wonder what that would have done to me at 20 to talk to him versus being me now and having kind of my own public persona versus my own private person. Do you struggle with that? Well, I do actually want to ask about being a one-person marketing team and how that you have to be online. There's public Ayana and private Ayana.
Yeah, I'm trying to be to a fault. I'm a very like a candid person, and I've had to learn to be a little more filtered. Not because I say inappropriate things, but because I can be like very, very, very honest. For example, somebody asked me about book talk, and I was like, oh, I don't like TikTok. Like, I'm doing this because I have to. I'm an introvert. This wears not what we're doing right now, but like being on TikTok, making content, putting makeup on every day, because I feel like I need to quote unquote look presentable. Like, that is exhausting. It's not at all something that I thought that I would ever have to do as an author. Like, I thought I'll write books and hang out in my little tower with my typewriter in my aesthetically pleasing room, and and it'll be great.
Please tell me you have a typewriter, please.
I don't have a typewriter, sadly. Like, it would probably drive me nuts.
I have a typewriter, and I've never used it.
Someday I will. I'm building my house, and I'm like planning out, I'm gonna have shelves. I'm excited to have like shelves, for enough shelves for my books for the first time ever. But I'm like, maybe I'll have enough space to have like an aesthetic typewriter, and I can do all the like with the cute little buttons and whatever. Anyway, that's what I thought being a writer would be. And there are days when I get to just get lost in my world. But actually, like if there was a pie chart, a huge part of my job is marketing myself. And I'm very fortunate to, like, my publisher is Penguin Random House, and specifically Penguin Teen. And they're awesome. They're really, really good at being innovative and supportive and helpful. But the bottom line is, as I said before, Gen Z wants to see the individual. They want you. And there was an author who's significantly older, like probably toward the end of their writing career. And I was telling them, and they said, well, can't you just hire someone? And I was like, bless your heart. No, I can't. No, I cannot. I have to do it myself. Nobody wants to see, like, I don't know, a little plushy penguin on a desk. Like,
you know what's so funny is that after my little marketing video blew up, that so many people like flooded my inbox and were like, I could you should hire a marketer. I do marketing, yada yada. I'm like, are you going to come to my house and film my content for me?
Exactly.
What do you mean? Like, I do all the content, I just pay you to post it or something? Like, what is this suggestion? No.
It's a weird thing. And I talked to my literary agent about it, and he was like, he made the valid suggestion. He was like, there are some authors who will hire, for example, college students who are getting degrees in marketing, because they don't summer jobs. It's fun for them. And I guess I could do that. But like you said, I'm paying you to take videos, tape me doing ridiculous things. And if you're like me, I'm making like billions of takes for each one. So you have to watch me going, like, start over, take 92, which is embarrassing. I don't want to pay someone to see me humiliated. This is bad enough for free. So.
I do want to ask you before our time runs out. I always like to talk to authors in different genres about the amount of control that they had over the final product of their book. Because that is another thing that I feel like readers don't have a clue about, because I know authors and who have no say over what their book cover art is, or the art inside, or the font, or even their title. Those kinds of things. How much control do you feel like you had over your process?
More than usual. So I recognize that I've had a fair amount of privilege. I will say, with my title, when we went on sub, my agent wanted to change. He suggested changing it, and I was like, I'm new at this, sure. But then I was like, no, I want it to be Beasts of Prey. Like I did doubt myself, and then we went back. I think.
Oh, you're lucky.
Yeah, it's a lot of luck and
my title was one of those SEO games of like, here's the keywords that we want to see, and it's just Scrabble, not Scrabble, whatever.
But I'll say, like, and I guess this part is like I'm talking to the authors or aspiring authors for this part. This is where picking the right people for your team matters, because my literary agent did so much fighting for me. Not like bad fighting, but for example, in my contract, I think I'm allowed to say this, I have a clause that says I have to ultimately approve my cover.
Yep. That was one of the things a friend, that the two pieces of advice I always give to aspiring authors is make friends with other better authors, and be prepared to receive their critique. And well, that's the twofold there. Make friends with other better authors who are farther along in their career than you are, and get ready to receive their critique. But one of them said, "Oh, this is the clause that you want. Get your book cover in your contract."
Yeah, and it isn't ridiculous. I can't just say no to 10 covers, but what it meant is I have to a degree, be happy with. And that's something that a lot of authors don't know to ask. Their agents should know to ask. So, it's one of those things like, advocate for yourself, put that stuff in there. Same, anything that you can get control over, ask for it. You may not get everything, but ask for it, put it on there and see if
I didn't get my original title, but they did want my cover to be salmon. Like pink.
Yeah.
And
several directions.
Yeah, that was like sick. I was like, no.
Just like, no.
Absolutely the hell not, no. Just to make me feel better as I am trying to finish my next book, and I know you are as well, how many words do you write in a day? Because I started, my debut was not in YA, so I am still working a full-time job. So my word output in a day is probably different than your word. So could you just give me some good feelings about how many words you write in a day?
Oh gosh. I should check Scrivener. Scrivener tracks it. It honestly depends on the day. It like I'm the worst. I'm kind of the worst because I try not to do word counts unless I'm in dire straits. Like when I was finishing Beast of Rue and I was like, look here, Ayana Gray, you have to finish this book. It's going to print on this day. You have to put down like 5,000 words a day. That was when I was
but you're on deadline. I get that.
I was not even on deadline. I was like not past deadline. I was past deadline. It was like the final, there was no time for screwing around. And it's really annoying and toxic because that is when I am most productive, when I am immensely stressed.
Why am I like this? Oh my gosh.
You like this. But I try when I'm like in zen, happy, aesthetically pleasing Ayana, I try to just write the scene, like a scene that I'm excited for. And then I try to always end it at a spot that I don't want to end at. Like if there's a little more, like I stop so that there's something exciting for me to get back to, but it's not usually, it's more fun when I don't set a word count. I can be like, I want to write this in, and then I can look and see how much I wrote at the end, and I can surprise myself.
I think I read an interview with Terry Pratchett, and I have no idea if he ever actually said this, but I globbed onto it because it seemed achievable. And he said that he gives himself a minimum count of 400 words a day, which is very small. And
Yeah.
you can do that. And you could do that in 10 minutes some days, but some days it takes a while to get that out.
And you could like, I think we as writers, we're obsessed with other people's processes. I'm obsessed with other people's process because we think that if we
somebody else has the key.
Yeah, we think that if we do that exact thing, that we will write the same kinds of books of the same caliber and quality, which I get why you think that. But everyone has their own process.
Yeah.
Like some people, you give them 3 months, they will do nothing until that final month. That is just how they are. I have a friend, a YA author, who keeps a diary, and she writes like militantly every single day. If she has a road trip and they go on a gas stop, she will get her 200 words in. And I'm like, you are unhinged. Like, but she can do that.
Good for her.
If you want to feel terrible about yourself, gosh, read about Danielle Steele's writing.
I have. She's like, I treat this like a job, and I write continuously from like 8 a.m. to like 5 or whatever. She sleeps like for 3 or 4 hours a day all the time. She does not get up from her desk. Someone brings her food. But that's the thing is, you could do the exact same thing. We could do the same thing as Danielle Steele or Nora Roberts. I'm picking really prolific writers. That doesn't mean we will write the same kinds of books they do. It just means it would be bad. I would write a very bad book if that was my writing process.
I'm like, I want to try it and see how bad I could, like, what kind of horrid thing could come out of trying to write that way. But point being, like, there are some days I'm super efficient. There are some days I walk around, and that's part of my process, is walking around with angsty music until the right idea comes. So
I don't think people realize that the work of writing most of the time doesn't look like writing.
No, it looks different for everybody.
Ayana Gray, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today. I am so excited for your upcoming release and your third book, which you're still writing. So congratulations. Debut, buddy. I didn't realize that at all.
We're forever bonded. Thank you for indulging me in all my rants, but you are so easy to talk to and so fun. And this was just a treat.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Good luck, and congrats on all of your success.
Thank you. Bye.
My thanks to my guest, Ayana Gray, whose debut novel, Beasts of Prey, is out everywhere, and her follow-up, Beasts of Ruin, comes out today. Pick it up everywhere fine books are sold, or get it from your local library. If you like this show and you'd like to support it, there are a number of ways to help. Consider sharing it with your friends on social media. You can also like or rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and while you're there, consider leaving a review. Literally any string of words will help recommend the show to other listeners just like you. You could also help keep the show free and producing regularly by joining my Patreon on a monthly basis. Patrons receive additional audio and video content, as well as archived episodes, a private Discord server, and a monthly book club. Sign up at patreon.com/headonfirepod. If you'd like to connect with me anywhere on social media, such as Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, I am at headonfirepod everywhere. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for downloading the show. And remember, don't tag authors in your book reviews. No, thank you.